Welcome back to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Bubar from San Pablo PD in California, 23 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Bubar. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Paige. It's an honor and a privilege. So glad to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it. I was hoping that we could start with you giving us a little bit of background.
Yeah. So when I first started in the early 2000s, I actually didn't know where San Pablo was. I never heard of it. I was just a recruit in the academy, just wanting a job. And San Pablo came. I looked into it. And what really drew me to San Pablo was, the community, very tight knit. So not many people know where San Pablo is. We're located in the Bay Area of California. I'm about 20 minutes east of Oakland. We're only 2.6 square miles. We're completely surrounded by the city of Richmond. We have 30,000 people that live in 2.6 square miles. We were the first city in the Bay Area to be recognized as being majority Hispanic. So more than 60% of my community is Hispanic. And coming into the job in a community like San Pablo, really challenging because, this is a blue collar community. They support their police department, but there's a lot of challenges. Our poverty rate here is twice of the county average. In the mid to late 90s, we were recognized as being the most violent city per capita in the country. So we had a lot of issues with gangs, shootings, narcotics, but it created an environment and a culture, really hard police culture, where really strong enforcement. We're really good at police work, and over time, over the next 2 decades, I've found that relationship with our community and our policing had to evolve, just like every other police department in the country. But our community now is more engaged, has a voice. Our relationship has changed. So as a result, we've been able to experience a lot of success in public safety. We've reduced crime by more than 50% over the past 2 decades. Gang violence is down, shootings are down, and we've had a lot of tough lessons. So when I first started, I only wanted to be a narcotics detective. Like, that was my dream job. I got to achieve that, and then promoted through the ranks from there, to where I'm blessed to be the chief of police. I've spent half my life serving this community in this police department, and it is the greatest job. And I know I'm biased, but I think I work for the best police department, at least in the Bay Area, if not California.
I love that. You know what? I was thinking the other day, because it's interesting when you're like, oh, I've spent half my life doing something. And, when you entered into this career, did you know that it was going to go by this quickly and that you would be here 23 years later? Because I feel like for me, like, everything has just gone by so quickly. And I never thought about that when I was younger. I always thought there was so much time, and then you blink and you're here.
Yeah, it's a good point. You don't really think about that, and especially as a patrol officer, right? Your world is very small. Your world is right in front of you, right? It is the next call. It is catching up on the prior call. Everything is right in front of you. So to think years and decades now of all of that experience, and then the responsibility, right, to use that experience to better serve your community, to better bring your organization forward. It happens in an instant. And as much as we want to say we prepare for it, it just happens. Yeah. So we have to be intentional on our leadership. We have to be intentional on how we progress. So a lot of tough lessons learned in that time. But to your point, things happen, and here I am. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just working with an academy recently, and they were on their last week. So they were about to graduate. There was that like senioritis. You could feel it in the air. And, one of the more tenured guys kind of, walked up to me and was like, yeah, it's hard to get these young people to like think ahead and to think that, they're going to be here one day. And he had 18 years, on the job. And he's like, it's hard to get them to be proactive and to recognize that like the things that they do now are going to impact them later. And I was like, think back to when we were that age. We were all, maybe not everybody, but I would say a lot of people were very similar in that sense. It's one day at a time. You don't have a lot of forward thought. You think you have so much more time than maybe you realize, things are going to go by. You don't have that, like that thought process when you're younger, and then, like I said, you blink and you're here and you're like, man, I wish I would have done that earlier. Or, and so I told the guy, I was like, I feel like it's kind of our responsibility, people who have been in their space for so long to tell those younger people like, hey, learn from me. These are the things that I did really well that worked. And these are the things that maybe I didn't do so well and I wish I would have done better, and you can learn from me. And hopefully through having those conversations, we can start to instill more of that proactiveness in the younger generation to start today. It's never too early to start, and your future self will be, happier in the end.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you're touching on is culture, right? Are thinking about the future and thinking long-term impacts. So now that those of us that have been in the profession for this long, how are we communicating that? How are we building that culture and preparing this incoming generation who grew up very differently than I did, and their expectations and their perception is very different, and how they have relationships is very different. And how they handle stress is very different than what we did. So being cognizant of that and making sure that we're participating in creating a positive culture to prepare this incoming generation to take over, to take care of us, take care of this department, take care of this community. I think that's part of the job. That's what we do.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to what you're saying before about like how there has to be evolution of things. And, we have to be able to be adaptable and to consider other ways of doing things. And that is really difficult. Like we kind of get stuck in our own one track, of how we've done it or how we perceive things, or, and I think sometimes we do have to get out of our way a little bit and recognize that maybe our way isn't the only way, or maybe it's not the best way. Maybe there are other ways to do things. But I also think, to your point, when you're dealing with so many different people who come from different walks of life, who are different ages, different genders, different timelines within their career, you have to be able to, speak to a lot of different personalities to get the same message through. And when you talk about culture, it's trying to get everybody, as a team on board with the same mission, right? You're trying to create that cohesiveness. And so there has to be that adaptability and that growth mindset.
Exactly.
When you said that you had to kind of evolve the way that you had done things within your community, and now you said that you are 50% lower in your crime rate, what were some of those things that you guys had to do? Maybe some of those like actionable things that helped you to find that level of success?
Yeah. So, within the past, I would say 10 to 15 years, we did have this kind of paradigm shift. And it started with, bringing in and implementing technology, right? Something as simple and as accessible as surveillance cameras. Bringing surveillance cameras into a community, or license plate reader cameras into a community. Now it's less controversial, right? It's accepted as a viable option for public safety to help keep your community safer. 10 to 15 years ago, that may not have been the case. And I know in our community, keep in mind, we're in the Bay Area, right? So we have privacy groups. We work with the ACLU. So to bring in this technology that started to become assisted us in solving crime and preventing crime, it really required us to make sure that our relationship with our community was sound and that we were communicating and being transparent with our community. So if we want to bring in these tools that are going to help our officers solve crime and be safer, we actually need our community support. These aren't tools that just we bring in and impose upon the community. This is a shared, this is a shared purpose as far as keeping our community safe. We believe this is the right way to go. And in that, and I was a part of that in implementing, this program where getting that community feedback helped inform us, right? How does it inform our policy, how we use technology? How does it inform our training? How is it that we are keeping our community safe? And what we found, and this is true, the only way to reduce crime is community policing and economic development. Mm-hmm. So as the chief now, if I want to reduce crime and I want to address crime, we don't just target and do proactive enforcement. We're going to stop everything that moves. We're going to make a lot of arrests. We're going to build a lot of criminal cases. That is valuable and that's part of it. But without the relationship with the community, these initiatives will fail. Ultimately, they will not be sustainable. You may have some short-term success, but it will not be sustainable because your community will actually build distrust in you with these hard policing initiatives. And that was something that was foreign to us because in San Pablo, we had a hard policing culture. Mm-hmm. We go out, and it's that whole warrior versus guardian thing. We're very much, embrace that warrior mentality, which has its place. And but the long-term effects on the community can be detrimental. So making sure that you do things like, coffee with a cop, neighborhood watch, business watch. As the chief, it is my goal every day to at least stop by 2 businesses and have a conversation with 2 business owners. Getting that feedback from the community, help supporting our economic development initiatives is the truest way to reduce crime. So we learned that through implementing public safety initiatives like technology, cameras, drones, creating dialogue and helping us understand how does our community want us to keep them safe. And that's important.
I'm a really big fan of actionable steps that you can take. And what you just said of, hey, my goal is to speak to 2 business owners within the community every single day. To me, that sounds like, and of course, everybody's busy, but that sounds like such a realistic, actionable thing that you can do to create those relationships. And I appreciate you saying that because sometimes we talk about a lot of stuff, but you being like, here's one way that we do that. And it's something that is totally doable and something that you can strive to do on a consistent basis. Do you think that those efforts in building stronger relationships with the community, do you think that helped with officer wellness and morale, having more of that connectedness?
1,000,000%. And I'll give you a tangible example. When it comes to technology, because we were successful in implementing a lot of technology programs, so we consider ourselves very technology forward. We have over 300 situational awareness cameras in 2.6 square miles. We have close to 100 license plate readers. And we have a drone as a first responder. We have gunshot detection software, one of only 2 cities in Northern California to have 100% coverage of gunshot detection. So because we were successful and we were able to share the success of these programs with our community and build support and have that dialogue and actually make changes internally and externally that helped keep our community safe, they supported our different initiatives in wellness. So in 2021, so coming out of the pandemic is when our city council approved the building of our new police department. So we're currently under construction building a new 42,000 square foot police department. Now, in that is designed specifically for officer wellness, things like infrared saunas, cold plunges, issuing wearables so officers can monitor their own health and well-being. These different initiatives are built into the design of this new police department. And every year the city goes to the community to survey, like, hey, how do you feel about the police service? How do you feel about the new building? How do you feel about the new technologies? And overwhelmingly, between 77 to 81% support our initiatives each year. And what that communicates to our officers is your community, they hear you, they see you because you hear them and you see them, and they're going to support you. And they're not just going to support you with kind words. They're not just going to show up at council and tell you how much they love the police department. No, the city is actually investing in wellness initiatives because we want to make sure that our officers are rested, healthy, can survive this career, because the level of service that we expect and our community expects is imperative on them being healthy and able to do the job. So yes, our relationship with our community has everything to do with the support that we receive that allows us, me as the chief, to take care of our officers so our officers can take care of the community.
I love that you said that, because I think that when we talk about wellness, sometimes it feels like intangible. Sometimes it's, we're having these conversations about, all of the, nuts and bolts, right? It's like we talk about the sauna, we talk about the cold plunge, we talk about the peer support and all the things that go into whatever each organization is going to have internally for wellness. But for you to attach that to a why, we're having these things because we want our officers to be physically, mentally, emotionally well and rested. Why? Because we care about them as individuals, but because we also want to make sure that they can do the best job for the community that we serve. And we recognize that if they're not those things, then they can't operate at a high level. And I think that sometimes we forget the why behind this. There's a lot of conversations about wellness right now. So I appreciate you kind of connecting that to why it's important to have these things.
Yeah. And it comes from experience, comes from a lot of tough lessons learned. If I could share a story, personal story, but we've had a peer support program for, going on a decade now. And when we first started it, we understood, like, hey, this is wellness means something and we want to take care of our officers. So let's start a peer support program. And we tasked the sergeant, who he was very personable, and he was outgoing. He was our resource person. He was also our SWAT team leader. So he had credibility. He was just our go-to person. And so he managed our peer support team and was doing a great job. And at some point, in 2019, I had heard that the sergeant was struggling with stress. And, he had communicated to some of our officers, like he was going through it. So I brought him in, and we talked about it. And I was a captain at the time, and I cared about this person professionally and personally. And I thought I believed I was doing the right thing, and we were talking about it, and we created a plan of action, and we were gonna deal with this. We're gonna do this together. I wanted him to know that he was supported. That was on a Wednesday. By Friday afternoon, he took his own life, and I will never get over that. I will never get over it. Understanding that there was a lot of external factors that were out of my control, things that I didn't know about. But that impact as a leader and what it meant to actually take care of our organization, take care of our officers, it really moved the needle for me in trying to figure out what does officer wellness actually mean, and how are we beyond, the ethereal, hey, let's talk about it. I want you to be aware of it. Here's, whether it's EAP or this other service, we recognize, a traumatic event happened, a critical incident happened. Let's debrief. Let's talk about it. Is there more that are we looking at this the right way? And so it really created this mission internally inside our police department of like, hey, let's try to figure this out. And we're not 100%, and I don't know that we'll ever be 100%. But the pursuit of trying to achieve officer wellness is what's important for me as the chief.
Yeah.
To make sure that, as much as we know about trauma and how officers are impacted and the unhealthy lifestyles of police work, we know more today than we did yesterday. Suicide, divorce, substance abuse, our mortality rates, like it's still through the roof. So how are we addressing that as leaders? Is something that we need to be asking.
Yeah. How do you, when you go through something like that, something so tragic, how do you process that as a leader? How do you process that as a human being? And I know you said that was kind of a catalyst for, the forward movement that you've made, over the past few years with wellness and what that looks like. And how do you maintain the message to everyone that this is not just a nice to have, that this is a have to have, that this is something that is so important, not just for the organization, but for individuals to take upon themselves to make sure that they're not only utilizing the resources that you have, but they're taking it upon themselves to prioritize them?
Yeah. So great question, because
I know it was like 4 different questions in there, so I apologize.
Yeah.
But
so, and I mean, anytime something like that happens inside a police department, and unfortunately, a lot of police departments are dealing with it today, right? There's something that happened today that a police department is dealing with, and so immediately you need to figure out how to support the officers and the staff that are here, creating dialogue, getting out in front of our staff and being vulnerable and being a human being, while also understanding like we have a job, we have a mission. The calls still come in, we still have to respond, but we're here to support you. But what are the next steps, and how are you putting that into action? So I had an opportunity around right after that event. I went into a program in California. We have this leadership program called Command College. It's an extension of a master's program. So essentially my thesis was, given our experience with technology, our success with technology, how do we leverage technology? How are we looking at trends of this incoming generation of officers, their experiences, their perspective, and how do we leverage technology to assist officers to survive this career, to deal with stress? And what I found was wearable technology. So the Apple Watches, the Fitbits, the Garmins, it's an emerging industry. I think as 2021, 1 in 4 people were wearing Fitbits or Apple Watches that were giving them constant updates on their health and their their rest. So how do you use that, and how can that be used in for police officers? And what I saw was, I'm a big football fan. So I was watching the NFL draft combine, and that's where a bunch of college athletes go and they perform. They do a bunch of physical agility tests, and I saw that these players were wearing this wearable technology that informed NFL teams of their heart rates. It was giving biometric readings, right? And that's because NFL teams invest millions of dollars in these athletes and their ability to perform. And when I looked at how we treat police officers have to make $1 million decision every single day. As a patrol officer, when I walk up to a car on a traffic stop or I go to a domestic violence call, I may be confronted with a situation where I have to make a decision in a fraction of a second to use force, use deadly force, not use force, how I talk, how I stand. And now that everyone has a body camera, I'm going to be judged on that fraction of a decision that I made. And that's going to impact my ability to have a job, take care of my family. I might lose my freedom. So we are compounding external stressors on the officers. And really, the only time I had to do a physical agility test to prove my health was when I got hired.
Yeah.
I have to pass the academy. I have to take a physical to get hired. And I don't have to ever exercise or worry about my health ever again. I'm just, as long as I show up to the calls, respond. Hopefully I survive. Hopefully I don't make a mistake. And that happens a lot with police officers. We get lucky. We survive this shift. We survive this call. And so we adopt an unhealthy life choices. When I first started, it was we're going to go out to the bar after work, and that's how we build camaraderie. That's how we build teamwork. It comes from a righteous place. In Special Forces, they have a certain Special Forces team. They say, sweat, bleed, and drink. So as a team, if you can sweat together, i.e. train, work out together, bleed together, right? Go on missions, experience the trauma, and drink together, come back, de-stress through, camaraderie and revelry. It builds a stronger team. So, and that's true for mission critical, like very mission specific operations in the military. But over the long term of a career, that long term stress, how is that actually impacting you, and how is that impacting your ability to do the job, right? So, looking at it from instead of just feelings, how do we feel? If I can look at it from a biometric standpoint of like what is happening in an officer's body when they're experiencing stress, and how can wearable technology be leveraged to inform them? And what we're trying to create is persistent and constant stress inoculation training for our officers. And that is something that is tangible. Instead of we want to feel better, I want you to perform better. I want you to survive this. And here's the impact if you don't address this.
I like that you said inform them. I think that information is so powerful. And when you don't know, you don't know. Right. And so like the first step to any forward progress is always awareness, right? What is going on? And when we're talking about wellness, what is going on? Like you said, your heart rate, your cortisol, your sleep, your nutrition, your physical fitness, what is happening in the body? And then what are those resources? But you can't identify what resources you need if you're not informed on what the weakness, I'll put that in quotes, like what the weaknesses are, right? Where's the room for improvement? And I think by having that first step of, we're just going to start with education, with information, and we're going to empower our people so that they know what is going on. So then they can start to take those steps for themselves in a more productive way. And I love that you said it's not just about feeling better, it's about performing better. And I think that we can take this in a few different directions, but of course, from a professional perspective, you want your agency to perform at an elite level. And when you compare this to sports, I love that you compared it to sports, because we see how sports teams operate, right? They do all the same things that you just said, and they're focusing on a lot of different levels of elite athleticism. They're focusing on rest and recovery. That's a big thing. They're focusing on hand-eye coordination. They're focusing on balance. They're focused on cardio. They do breathing techniques. They do, like, you see all of these Netflix documentaries and I want to take snapshots and send it to everyone on LinkedIn. I'm like, look at LeBron doing this, or look at, this really high level athlete doing that, because what it does is it allows them to make decisions under pressure. It allows them to reduce their risk of injury, which is really important. It allows them to have even that fraction of edge on somebody else. Right. And even when you see these athletes perform really well, they're still reviewing tape. They're still in, the PT, and they're still in, they're trying to figure out where can they be even better. So I think that sometimes the conversation we have is from this perspective of, you are not in a good place. And so it's only for people who are doing poorly. But I think when we look at performance and we look at the different levels of performance, yes, there might be some people who maybe did let some of the things slip, and they're kind of at, a ground zero, and they have to kind of work their way back up to maybe where they were once they graduated and passed, before entering into the career. But then even the people who are really high in their athleticism or their performance, how can we also try to, find little areas for improvement? So it's not just for people who are, quote unquote, broken or not doing well. It's for everybody.
So exactly. You summarized it beautifully. And that's what I saw. So my sergeant, who's my friend, my brother, who's performing at a very high level, and if you would have just saw him day to day, you wouldn't interpret the stress that he was actually going through. And quite frankly, I don't know that he was interpreting the stress he was going through, right? So what happens to an officer, and this was part of the thesis, is in addressing to the point where you're talking about is why wait for that traumatic event to happen? Why wait for an officer to come forward, which is very hard to do, and say, I'm hurting, I need help, and advocate for themselves? What if we could address it perpetually in the officer's hands? So what happens on an officer from shift to shift? And in San Pablo, we're really busy. We have 36,000 calls for service every year. My department's only 62 sworn. We're really small. So we're really active. So on any given day, a patrol officer can go call to call and go to a shooting scene. And then the next call is an incident where a child was assaulted. Next call is a traffic collision where someone was seriously injured or died. Next call was a foot pursuit. Next call was a physical altercation. There is a compounding impact of stress. And physiologically, what's happening in our body is acute stress is good. And it serves its purpose. Like, people talk about stress like, oh, stress is bad, we need to reduce stress. Well, no, stress is a function in our body that allows us to perform certain things that we otherwise wouldn't do, right? Adrenaline gets gets put in. I'm now more focused. I'm more aware. The consequence of that, though, is agitation. Is also, I'm more aggressive. Acute, that could serve its purpose. Compounding over the course of a shift. By the end of my shift, chemically, I have deficiencies in serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, my endorphin. I cannot regulate. And if you actually evaluated an officer at the end of their shift, they would be clinically depressed. Mm. As a young officer, we're able to deal with that, right? Because everything is new. This is exciting. And we'll see officers in different phases of their career. And we've grown to accept the salty vet, right? The one that is maybe a little prickly, cynical, has a very skewed perspective of society and has negative comments. And we accept that as just the way it is. But what if we didn't have to? So when I talked about introducing infrared saunas and cold plunges into the new police department, those aren't just spa treatment amenities for officers to feel good. It's a tool, because 11 minutes a week in cold immersion allows you to regulate those chemicals, the serotonin, the endorphins. You immediately get an overdose. It helps you regulate it. 20 to 60 minutes in elevated heat, raising your body temperature, helps with blood flow. You're able to regulate with this contrast therapy your own emotion. So if we could give them the tool, and I'm putting it right in their locker rooms, the male locker rooms and the female locker rooms have these. We have sleep pods so they can get rest. Things that we take for granted. If we had officers that had technology that alerted them of when they were feeling stressed, and I'll give you an example of how this compounds. A brand new officer, he has less than a year on. He's on a call. He's on an alarm call. It's a call that we get every day. It's the middle of the night, and he has to clear a building. He goes through, he clears a building. It's dark. He's with his team. Everything is fine. He gets done with the call, and there's no indication that anything is unusual. But the safeguard alert on his watch informed him, hey, your body is experiencing stress right now. Mm-hmm. And this officer took it upon himself to introduce breathing exercises to be mindful, so he can lower his stress, lower his heart rate, regulate his breathing, and calm down. So when you see officers, and we'll see it now in body camera videos, right? The controversial use of force or that weird interaction. And, even I am like, well, why is the officer acting that way? That officer seems really agitated, seems really aggressive. And, cops, we think, oh, something must have happened during the shift. The public doesn't give you that consideration. Just that, oh, that officer is a jerk, and they shouldn't be doing their job. Well, what if that officer had the tools to be self-aware in real time, and given the tools, whether that's through breathing exercise or other means, to address that? Yeah. Call to call. And that's what we're trying to achieve. Giving the officers the tools to be aware, create stress inoculation training. So our brand new police department, we have immersion training, we have virtual reality. We want, and we're going to introduce the biometrics into our training, because we want to show our officers, this is what your body is doing. This is how your body is interpreting the stress. Even if you're not aware, your body is doing this, and we want you to be aware, because then you can do something about it. Contrast therapy, breathing exercise, whatever it is, you have the tools to now address it. So now you can handle that next call calmly and safely. You can serve our community. You can perform at a higher level. You don't go code black in that pursuit to where you can't function because the stress is so overwhelming. you've been inoculated to that stress. You know you can perform. It's not foreign to you. We're not introducing it right now on this call. You've been here before. This is what we're trying to get to, and my belief is if you have a police department that is self-aware of their stress and is actively doing something about it, you're going to see greater success in performance in relationships, in use of force. Your complaints should go down. But this is what we're, as leaders, if there's technology out there and we know more today about trauma and wellness, then we have to pursue these initiatives.
There are so many things that I want to address that you just talked about.
It's super exciting.
So excited. Yeah, I'm nerding out right now. You've heard the expression that you don't rise to the situation, you fall to the level of your training, right? Like we've heard this before.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you said. If you don't know how to handle stress, and I tell people this all the time, like how can we train ourselves to be able to regulate our nervous system during like even easy, like normal day-to-day stuff, right? It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like how can we learn to regulate our nervous system when we're in traffic or when we're around, like maybe you have kids and they're just really getting on your last nerve, or maybe it's, a conversation you're having with a partner. How can we learn to manage ourselves during those things? Because when you learn to deal with stress on a consistent basis, then when something really big happens, you have those tools. You can fall to that level of training, right? And so I love that you said that you guys are really trying to incorporate this into your training as a part of your day-to-day, what you do normally. And I appreciate that you talked about the different kinds of stress. I think a lot of people don't realize that. There is eustress and there's de-stress, right? Or distress. Eustress is what you were saying. It's like, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe like you're about to do a presentation, and you're feeling like the adrenaline, or maybe you're about to run a race, and you start to feel that and you recover a lot quicker from eustress. But distress is where we want to try to figure out how can we get back to baseline as quickly as possible. Yeah. One of the things that you said that I agree with and I really appreciate, because I think that this is why it doesn't feel tangible. When you don't have, like, you're using technology to basically have a tap on the shoulder, right? It's like, hey, you might not know, but this is happening. And a lot of times we don't understand what's happening physiologically. But if you were to like cut your arm or break a bone, you know what's going on with you in that sense, right? But emotionally, a lot of times you don't understand what's going on. So using technology to have a little shake or a little tap of like, hey, this is what's happening. But then the follow-up to that is, what are the resources? So we said this before, first step is awareness. So you're using technology to provide that awareness of, hey, your heart rate is elevated, your cortisol is elevated. Then what is that resource that can help to down-regulate and bring you back down to baseline? And of course, we know that breathing techniques are going to be one of the quickest ways that we can do that. Of course, there's other things you can do too, but I like really nerded out when you were talking about all the things, because I think that it's so important to have education like this. And a lot of the conversations, I told you this offline, but a lot of the conversations that I have, and it's not everywhere, it's not everyone, but it's this kind of weighing the ROI, and there's these conversations of like, oh, well, maybe that's a nice to have, but not a have to have, or, oh, well, maybe we don't have the resources that, we want to invest in these certain things, because I don't think there is that like tangibility quite yet. I don't think that there's that deeper understanding of why these things are important and how you can implement them to have success moving forward. And so I appreciate you saying that, because I think that sometimes you have to reevaluate the things that are important and why.
Yeah. And especially, and this is what I've seen, with leaders, right? So the culture I came from in policing, which made me successful, right? The hard policing culture, how I dealt with it. We drink together. We accept that this is a hard life, and the expectation is sometimes and sometimes it's subtle, but those are the things that made me successful. So I'm going to impose that perspective or that value, the values that I had coming up on this incoming generation. And there's a disconnect there. So, there are peers, people in command positions that feel that this is all feelings. This is very soft. And we are much better now. And I think I think as a profession, that is starting to fade. But then what do we do with that, right? So addressing the stigma, bring awareness, giving the tools to officers so that they can perform better. Leaders in law enforcement need to start looking for those tangible ways to actually impact and bring solutions to the officers. And it doesn't have to be this huge, whether expensive or, I have to send my officers to a retreat so they can go meditate and do yoga. No, we have an example where an officer took control of his own stress in real time and just started breathing and just being aware. And for me, my goal inside this police department, because we're not at 100%, I want to get to 20%. I want one in 5 officers to embrace this program with VigilLife, use it, advocate for it. And if I can get to 20% inside my police department, then I have critical mass and now culture starting to be developed. Mm-hmm. And if I have a culture of officers who prioritize being self-aware and taking control of their own health and well-being and supporting each other and calling each other out, then we're well on our way to having that healthy, high-performing police department, right? So it starts with me as the chief. What culture do I want to bring? I want to bring healthy culture. I want to bring supportive culture. What does that mean? Well, for us, we're going to leverage technology and we're going to relate it to training and performance. And we believe that is something tangible that officers can identify with, will relate to, and will participate in. And self-motivation, officers opting in voluntarily is the best case scenario, as opposed to, well, I'm calling in this disgruntled officer and I'm going to order them to go to this retreat because they have 5 complaints and they need to get better. And you just need to talk to the community better and you need social skills and your interpersonal skills. Give them the tools on the front end to be aware, to take control and support that.
Yeah. Do you think there's a couple of things you said in there that were really, really interesting? Do you think that 20% number is the sweet spot to start, having that ripple effect? Because I've never had a chief say that before, but it's interesting because, when you have these conversations, everyone's like, oh, well, if 50% or 60% don't do it, it's not worth it. But you're saying 20% is what it takes to start to have that compounding effect over time.
Yeah, and especially a department my size, right? 20% of it, because it's something that is realistic, right? I need, if I can get 12 officers on board, and I'm very strategic, right? I'm selecting these officers to participate, to advocate for it, because I feel like they're going to latch on and they're going to work because it's important to them, right? So how you bring in a program like that is you have to be strategic. And for me, if I can get 12 officers on board, the right 12 officers, combination of training, SWAT, command staff, supervisors. If I can get 12 officers, that's achievable. That's accessible. And what I have seen is exponential adoption from the rest of the officers. Maybe I never get to 100%, but if I can get to as close to 100% of officers that have this wearable technology, whatever that number is, we're going to be better served. We're going to be performing better as a police department.
Yeah.
And if you look at it from a pragmatic standpoint, right? All we're talking about is adaptation. And this is from, the athlete training component. If I want to run a marathon, which I'm not, I never want to run a marathon. If I wanted to run a marathon, I'm going to start training, and that first mile is going to suck. It's going to be hard. And then I'll adapt to it, and I'll get better, and I'll start performing better. If I want to train, if I want to build muscle, I need to introduce stress to those specific muscles. I need acute stress because I want to create inflammation in the muscle to rebuild stronger. If I want to get better at something that is uncomfortable, I want to introduce that stress to them so they can get comfortable with it, so they can perform better. So stress inoculation is similar, if not exactly alike, every other way that we train. Introduce it, be aware of it, get them comfortable in the environment, and then perform. So it's not this thing that's out there that's wrapped up in emotions and feelings. Like I said, that's ethereal, right? Like, hey, we want a healthy officer that eats better and sleeps well. Well, yeah, of course, we know that. But now I have a device that's actually gives me a percentage of how well did I sleep last night? What is my battery power for my body? If I have a low battery power, what does that mean? Well, that's going to inform me on how I approach this call, or how maybe I slow down a couple miles on this pursuit because I'm aware that I didn't get the best sleep, right? So it is so accessible and achievable. And when you actually talk to people, it makes sense. And if it's that accessible and it makes sense, and it's going to make officers healthier so they can be safer, so they can keep our community safe, why wouldn't we explore it?
Yeah. Well, I love that because I've asked this question a lot, and I've gotten so many mixed reviews, and you really answered this question in action. I've asked this question: do you think that wellness will be a part of training? That it's just training? There's not this separation between like wellness training and training. It's training. Like they go hand in hand. Like you're introducing these things like into your regular day to day, and it's normal. And what you just said is that it's like, it's not this woo woo circle. We're not holding hands in kumbaya. Like we're going to really try to implement these things that are going to help in all aspects of wellness, which is also going to translate to performance on the job, but it's also going to translate to performance at home. And it's going to help the overall wellness, and performance of each person within the organization. And you are like combining them. You're like, this is training.
Yeah. And what we know of training, this is part of the thesis, your body doesn't know the difference, right? So you could go into a training scenario and you're going to be 100% safe. You're going to come out of this okay. And they found this in the military through Siri training, where they train CIA operatives how to deal with stressful interrogations and torture. And you bring in people, you're going to be okay. And maybe you appear calm, but inside your body is experiencing a level of stress. So as we in this new police department with this regional training center, we're going to bring in other police departments too to train with us, because I want to expose other police departments to this type of training. But if you attached a wearable that gave you biometrics, and now I put you in a scenario, whether that's live fire, VR, hands-on defensive tactics where we're rolling on the mat. And now I'm going to show you what was happening inside, because outwardly you may appear calm, and stress is very individualistic and we experience it in very different ways. Mm. But I want you to know how you experienced it and what was happening to you, and identify the markers of what was happening. So now when you go into that real life scenario and all of a sudden the hairs are standing on the back of your head on this car stop and you don't know why, and you already know, like, I know this feeling. I know what's happening. I'm able to control this. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to perform. And a lot of times what we see, because when I started training, it's very static, right? Mm-hmm. I have to qualify at least once a year. I line up, I take well-aimed shots. I can breathe. I'm very comfortable. Maybe I do arrest control techniques, once or twice a year. But what the training is going to look like going forward, and especially if we incorporate biometrics, is we want to create that stress inoculation. We want to get that reading. Maybe that means you do 20 burpees and now you go into this training. We're going to create environments where officers are performing in stressful environments. So when it's introduced to them in the field, it's not this foreign concept. And that in and of itself is something that's very tangible and relatable to every police officer, and it should be relatable and translate to every leader. Like we're preparing our officers to perform better through stress. So again, the technology is there, the environment is there. We as a profession are ready for this level of training. So we have to pursue it.
I don't know how I want to word this exactly, because I kind of got a little emotional while you were talking. I feel like you have taken an incredible tragedy and you have used that as a motivator to implement these things that are going to help improve the individuals in your department's lives long term. And I just wanted to maybe just address that. Maybe it's not a question, but maybe it's an observation, with the story that you told earlier. Now you using what you learned, throughout your career and through that tragic event to try to improve things moving forward. And I appreciate those efforts and the passion that is very clear that you have around this. So thank you.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to even share this. And you asked me a question how I processed that tragedy. I'm still processing it. I am blessed to be in a position to where I feel like I can help this incoming generation of officers, and so that is my pursuit. It gives me some sense of purpose for going through that. As a department, we want it to mean something. We need purpose. Everyone needs purpose. And so this is one of those things that I feel is important, and I think is not just important to the San Pablo Police Department, but to us as a profession to survive this career. Because, like I said, suicide in officers and having unhealthy officers responding to critical incidents is still an issue for us, and we have an opportunity to try and do something about it.
Yeah,
and that's what we want to do.
Yeah. My final question for you is for that younger officer, maybe someone who's brand new or earlier in their career. What words of advice would you give to them? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier, or something that you've learned along the way.
I always fall back on this saying, and I don't know where I got it from, and I'm sure it's it's on a bumper sticker or a Hallmark card somewhere. But try hard not to offend. Try harder not to be offended. Mm. There's so much polarizing information out there. We are inundated with social media, with and we as a society, we're very tribal by nature, right? So if you believe in this or you are a supporter of this, it means something. And as a police chief and as a police officer, my responsibility is to protect all individuals in my community. And I believe everyone has the inherent right to feel safe in their community. And, we may have differences of opinions on how we achieve that, but I've had dialogue with protesters, with activists, and I've been called all sorts of things, internally in my police department and externally, by people who are agitated. And what I've landed on is this: we actually all want the same thing. We are all going in the same direction. And that is, how do we better our situation? How do we keep our community safe? And how do we feel safe? Which can mean different things to different people. Yeah. So when someone attacks me or disagrees with me, I'm very intentional on leaning into and emphasizing the common ground of, well, this person, we have differences and it's okay to agree to disagree. And I wish we did that more in society, agree more to disagree. And no matter what, I still support you. And I support that individual for what they're trying to do, even if we disagree on how we get there. And it allows me, it puts me in way more conversations. It puts me in much more dialogue. And my objective is sometimes I'm not trying to convince someone. Sometimes my job is to listen so I can understand. Even all the agitators and the protesters helps inform me as a chief on how to lead. So there's value in all of it. And you can choose to shy away from it. And if if you disagree so much, and it is so much a part of your person, and you identify with this one belief system, it will preclude you from having that dialogue and having that shared perspective. Could be another officer, it could be a member of your community, but do not shy away from that. Don't be offended. Lean into it. Have that dialogue. Put yourself in that uncomfortable position, because that's what we're talking about here.
Right.
I'm training, or I want to train officers to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. When you experience that stress, know that you're still going to be able to perform. Know that you can still see the light, and you will get through, and you will survive, and you will make things better. Don't shy away from it. Lean into it. Embrace it. Harness it, and use it for good. It's kind of my soapbox.
I loved it. I could talk to you for probably 2 more hours, but thank you for coming on here and sharing insights, words of wisdom, the things that you're doing organizationally. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paige. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.